Please welcome the incredible Diva Diaz.
Thank you, Renee. It's so good to be here with you.
I love that we're on the same time zone.
Yes, me too.
Or maybe you're an hour behind, I
I
think.
am, but I think
Okay.
that's incredibly close. I was expecting a much bigger difference.
So here's what I'm learning about being someone who works from Pacific Standard Time
Mm,
is that Europeans are used to working later.
100%. Yeah. We're like a nighttime crew over here.
Yeah, I'm like up at 6 a.m. doing calls, and I don't know if I prefer morning or evening. I'm actually enjoying this like kind of lazy mornings.
Yeah. Yeah. And late dinners.
Now that's weird. That's very weird for me because back home we eat at 5:30.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyways, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And I am stoked to have you here to talk about like relationship stuff, relationship as in like a loving relationship, intimate relationships, but also kind of like the through line for all relationships
Yeah.
and some of the things that we need to look out for ourselves personally, but also in business. Because when it comes to being a leader, one of the last things most of us fail to prepare for are the colorfulness of relationships. So tell us a little bit about what you do, who you are, and why we want to talk about this today.
Yeah. So I'm a life and business coach. I've been doing this work for about 16 years since I left the corporate world. I traveled around working in business and economic intelligence for several years, loved it, absolutely loved my job, was very high performing, overachieving, as you know, some of us entrepreneurs tend to be. And then I burnt out. And in that burnout, I was like, okay, I've got to start to take care of myself. And so I turned to self development and just to really starting to prioritize myself more, not just give everything to my work and my work relationships, which I had done. And in that, I discovered that I loved everything that I was learning and exploring. And I really loved sharing everything that I learned. So that's when I started with the coaching. And for me, I think it's so important, like you were mentioning, to talk about relationships and the impact that they have on us in life, because it doesn't just affect one part of your life. Like I wish life could be segmented sometimes, but it's just not, so if you're going to have a healthy relationship at home or at work, it is going to affect how you feel during your day. And it is going to affect the choices that you make and how you behave with people that you care about. And I think that's something, again, like you mentioned, that we don't really learn about as an actual skill. So very often it's trial and error. And after many years, you might say, well, great, after 20 years, I finally have this experience, but it would have been nice to have known some of this beforehand. So yeah.
I know we were talking about wrongful dismissal and oftentimes how entrepreneurs just fail to, I guess, learn about what it means to be a leader. Because we think of leadership as like just like drawing in the strategy and saying, hey, this is the 10 out of 10 vision. This is where we're headed. But we fail to realize that there's people involved and a lot of people, including yourself.
Yeah.
And that this like toxic environments aren't great. And sometimes we don't realize that it's not necessarily a failed strategy that fails the business, but it's the people that fail the business.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, one of the things that I've discovered is that when you're happy, it is so much easier to address problems. It is so much easier to make decisions quickly, to have clarity. When there is toxicity in the workplace, all of that goes down the drain because toxicity is insidious. So it might not even be so obvious. And to me, the most dangerous type of toxicity is, coming from the people who are very often placing themselves as a victim, like we spoke about earlier too, because it is so subtle that bit by bit they wear you down and you don't realize that your behavior has changed to accommodate these other people.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I remember with this particular team member, she was so good at what she did. So when she was on, she was crushing her work. She's a creative, like a writer, and she had really great agency in understanding like workflows and how things and dots should be connected. But I think that there was part of that was like largely hooked into her ego as well.
Yeah.
And so she couldn't fathom how other people couldn't get it, even people that were just graduating from college, joining the workforce, and they don't have the work experience. She was the oldest person on the team with by far the most experience. So she lacked the patience. But the problem was that she had such a victim personality that, I mean, we saw it from the very beginning. And when we let her go, she turned around and sued us for wrongful dismissal. But before that, she would literally complain about every little task that she didn't like to do, to the point that on her last month of work with us, she was only working on the things she enjoyed. Everybody else picked up where she left off. But they were too afraid to tell me how they were feeling in this. So finally, when I let her go, everyone was like, ah. And it's like, I knew it intuitively. I knew that it was just time. And I couldn't, like, I felt bad for her. I couldn't pull the trigger, but I didn't realize it was affecting like 10 other people. So yeah. So, I mean, and then it shows up in like friendships too, and relationships. And just gotta like, the how I got to the point is like the last straw, right? It's like the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah.
But there's so many things you need to see before you get to that point. And I'd love for you to talk about that one thing also being that sometimes you don't realize how bad it is until you're actually surrounded by incredible people.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of like, whoa. So tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think, you know, what you just said was so key, in that you very often think that it's just you that's having that experience of the person. Why? Because there's very often not enough evidence. All of it is, well, a lot of it can be based on intuition and just how you're feeling and little details. And so it's really hard to say this person did this thing, because it could be a little comment. It could be just how they show up that day. It could be a specific attitude that they have. And if you were to mention that to anybody, it could look like you're the one that's being petty. So I think that's part of the difficulty in actually being able to trust ourselves and notice right from the beginning. Whereas in hindsight, it's so easy to look back and go, oh, I actually knew this. This makes so much sense, you know. But that small intuitive kind of sense of knowing that we have is never going to be like a hammer to the head. And so for me, one of the key things to recognize out now is that intuition is a huge part of entrepreneurship, like massive. And we use it to be creative, and we use it to plan for the future, and we use it for the vision that we have. And yet we have a tendency to ignore it in certain areas when it might mean that we're being unkind or having an unkind opinion of someone, rather than recognizing that the evidence is actually there. So one of the things that for me has been really interesting to notice is that whenever I feel slightly, doesn't need to be a lot, but slightly disempowered by somebody, that's already my number one biggest red flag. And it doesn't need to be like a hard fact. They don't need to have done anything in particular, but just being in somebody's presence, if you feel that you need to somehow make yourself smaller, I would pay attention to that. I don't know what your experience has been with that.
Well, that, and it also got me thinking of the opposite. Like, sure, shrinking yourself, but also trying to like inflate yourself so that you can feel like you fit in.
Yes.
And I had that experience working in the Valley with a bunch of tech startups.
Wow.
When I was sitting across this big table from a bunch of 25-year-old tech bros that literally felt incredibly entitled. The ego's like through the roof. And I was a woman, and I was in the creative space. So I was like the opposite of them. And they disrespected me. They disrespected my agency. They disrespected what I did. And I was really trying to like be bigger and be better and try to say the fancy words to fit in. And I often asked myself, what am I doing here? Why am I doing this? I'm trying to prove to them what? And just, I mean, you have this feeling of already feeling defeated, but before even showing up for work or before even entering a room, is either like one of two things. One is that you're overthinking it, but also two, it could be the intuition is like, I don't belong in this room. I don't want to be in this room. I don't need to be here. So yes, I feel that The shrinking is often surrounding yourself with people that don't believe in themselves enough and have that jealousy, the victim mentality. And then there's the opposite,
Yeah.
when it's like you have to try to expand to fill spaces in which you don't even need to be.
Absolutely. And also, I completely understand, because when I was in the corporate world, I worked with maybe 97% men. And I loved it, but it was a very different environment. And there was a sense of having to prove myself massively. And in that, what I had to look at too is exactly what you're saying, like, what makes me think that I don't fit in here? Because if I'm by myself outside of this situation, I know how to do the job well. I have ideas. I enjoy it. I am thorough. I'm high achieving, all of those things. So what changes when I step into the room and it was just the people? And so to me, that's been such a key thing to begin to notice. How am I feeling? But also, if you reverse that and talk about leadership, like, how are you showing up and how are you making the people around you feel as well, which I think is so important.
It's such a feminine thing too. And what I love about this kind of era for us, at least what I'm seeing and observing, is that there's largely more acceptance for that feminine energy in the workplace, because we have the empathy, the patience. We can kind of see things and read the play better in terms of like emotions than men do, and not dissing men. And then there's a lot of like feminine type leaders too, that crush it. But that's what I love about this era.
Yeah.
Is that we're seeing that there's actual studies out there and there's facts that female leaders help businesses grow better, maybe not faster, but more sustainably because of that. And I think that women, we often make decisions from the heart and the intuition, whereas men are always analyzing the situation. They're in their brain. It's like, is this a smart investment or not? And they can be very fast and maybe too fast sometimes at making decisions. But anyways, I digress.
Yeah, no, but I think that's such a great thing to look at as well, because one of the things that I came across personally was when I would be, having some kind of relationship, whether it was at work, I mean, not like a personal relationship at work, but having to deal with somebody who was quite toxic, or then in my personal life, it was very easy for me to look inwards, like you're saying, using more of that feminine energy and think, well, what's wrong with me? What have I done that attracts this? But actually what I've come to learn is that people who have certain toxic personality traits are very, very drawn to high achieving, successful people and women. Why? Because they do have that loyalty. They are problem solvers. They are incredibly empathetic. And those are the same traits that will create a lot of success in life and a lot of, like determination and growth and high achievement and all of that. But it also will make it so that you might stay loyal in a situation way beyond the time that you should. You might be covering up for somebody's behavior because you're so empathic towards, what they might be going through. You might be taking on responsibility for things that you don't need to be taking responsibility for. And so it's those exact traits that make us so strong that actually attract those personalities too. And I think it's so important to really recognize that, so that you don't go into this self-criticism and look at what you might be doing wrong to bring these people into your life.
Right. Well, I think of some of my amazing friends that I love so dearly that are single, and they're like in their late 40s, early 50s. And in my mind, it's like, I know them so dearly. All I can think about is how much of a catch they are.
Yeah.
Like, you're such a catch. How come there's no lineup of men out the door trying to date you? And it's the same thing. There's so much to unpack, but it comes down to like worthiness, like, walking into this, if you're like the only woman in the room, like for me, sitting around that table with all these tech bros, if I had that worth of myself, and the trust and the instinct to actually just do something, I would have just left. I wouldn't have tried to change anything because I'd be butting up against way too many personalities. And it just wasn't in my interest to be there. But there's always a lesson in it too.
Yeah.
And I think for me, the reflection was in really understanding that I wasn't trusting myself to make these bold decisions. Or even speak up. Like, I remember one time a guy said to me, he had me come into this tech company and he gave me like a share, like 1% equity in this company. And I'm like, I don't even know anything about this industry. And I would go to these meetings. I'm like, I don't know anything about the work that these people are doing. And I thought that he wanted my input for the marketing or something. And I overheard him saying that it was like essentially he had invited me to be like the representation for women and to have a beautiful woman in the room. Those weren't the words he used. And I'm like, I hear these things happening. I really do. And then I question myself, why am I in this room? Mind you, the other men in that room did not act like that, but this was the CEO, co-founder of the company.
Yeah.
And it was like that week I just left. I'm like, I can't believe that you even said that, even if it was a joke. And I'm not going to stay because I don't want to attract more of that, because I'm putting my foot down by and walking away.
Yeah. And I love that. That's such a good boundary. And it's so great that you acted quickly. Because I mean, I personally know that I've stayed in situations way beyond, a week. Like you were fast in recognizing what was true for you and recognizing, hey, this doesn't actually align with my values at all. I've had situations quite similar actually where, people have been disrespectful, but then I've thought, well, can they actually mean it? They say such different things to my face. And I think that's part of, again, recognizing, okay, is this actually a toxic relationship or is this a healthy one? Because you have to start really looking at the evidence. Well, your evidence was you heard him say this, it was, so rather than being kind of sidetracked by the way somebody behaves or maybe is overly nice to you to get what they want, essentially, really looking at the evidence.
So after this, like in these moments, how do you start to rebuild your sense of self when you feel so defeated?
Yeah, I think for me, it's been mostly like small actions. If I'm honest, I think as somebody who is very, like highly aware and sensitive of people in general, I would never want to hurt anybody. So what I've done a lot in my working life as well as personal life is perhaps over-delivered to compensate where relationships were kind of lacking. And so for me, a big part of the work has been to put a bit of focus back on myself. But I couldn't do it all at 100% immediately. It really has been, small steps. So even things like, I remember with a kind of unhealthy work relationship last year, just starting to take some time to myself on purpose during the day to go out for a walk, go out to a nice cafe, simple things. They're not productive things. So it really went against my whole kind of like ethos in general, but they really were great for mental health and for me to start to get a sense that, hey, prioritizing me really is healthy. And in that, what started to come back was my strength. And the other thing that I find so key here as well is reconnecting with people who really care about you and who love you. And I have to say, I'm so blessed to have, a family that I'm very, very close to, girlfriends who, are like the loves of my life. And whenever I reconnect with them, they give me a baseline of what I should be expecting in any kind of relationship. And that's not to say that every relationship is going to be majorly significant, but you recognize how you want to be treated and what's acceptable and what isn't. So when I've had those moments of, hold on, I need to kind of work out whether this is working for me or not, I always go back to that baseline. Like, does this relationship align with my values? Is this something that I walk away feeling lighter about myself? Or am I feeling like I've got to adjust myself and my behavior in any kind of way? And if I look at 1, 5, 10 years from now, without that person in my life, without that relationship, be it professional or of any kind, what does that look like? And how do I feel in it? Beyond the fantasy that we have in our head and the way that we've pictured things going, because very often it's that hope that keeps us in way beyond the time that we should be there. So beyond that.
Oh my gosh, even with like employees, it's the same.
Exactly.
So, okay, the hope. Oh, I was going to say something about like, oh yes. So holding on to these relationships. So I actually went through this like interesting thing with an acquaintance of mine the last year or two. And I feel like if your mind is circling around trying to figure someone out, you know, when you're like, there's something
Yeah.
about this person, I don't know what it is. If it's so strong in the intuition, it's because it's
Yeah.
right. No one's ever regretted making a decision because of their intuition. And I am not a gossiper. The last thing I will do is talk ill about somebody behind their back. If I have an issue with somebody, I'm actually mature enough now to go and say, hey, listen, this thing you said, and I had to have this conversation with them, which I thought was going to be an hour ended up being 3.
Wow.
And what I learned was that giving them the platform was that they were going through something that I couldn't
Yeah.
comprehend. And they were living in this keeping up with the Joneses mentality. And so felt like they were always needing to expand to fill spaces they didn't have the energy
Yeah.
for. And I always felt myself shrinking around
Mm-hmm.
them too. So you can imagine these like opposing
Yeah.
forces, like they're expanding, I'm trying to shrink. This doesn't feel good. We're supposed to be friends, building each other up.
Yeah.
Like, let me help you expand faster. I guess the lesson in all of this is you have to have the tough conversations. And those are the things that most people just resist. They'd rather be in mediocre discomfort every single day than to have like one really, really tough moment.
Absolutely. And you know, I grew up in an environment with very hardworking parents that were very I wouldn't say necessarily high achieving, but they had big dreams, and anything that, you know, I've thought of, they were like, you can do it kind of thing. But at the same time, there were other people around us that were quite toxic. And so my idea of relationships was based on what I grew up with, as is true for so many of us. So I thought that tolerating certain bad behaviors was a sign of love, acceptance, and of kindness, and kind of just thinking, well, the person can get better, but just because you can imagine it doesn't mean that's going to happen. And also, you know, that's probably just the way you would behave, doesn't mean it's got anything to do with that person. So, you know, I think the tough conversations, absolutely. And I know that when I've avoided them, it's because I've been trying to tolerate rather than actually really recognize that in that kind of scenario, that just doesn't really work. It just really doesn't work. And so you've got to get really practical about it and recognize, okay, is this a conversation that I can have? Because there have been people, and I'm sure you've experienced this too, where that wouldn't be a conversation I could have. Like, they would not be open to an open conversation whatsoever. Like, that would just destroy everything and turn into like conflict. When you have somebody that you can have a chat with, to me, that is a huge gift, whatever direction it goes in, because at least you get some kind of closure, and at least, you know, you've done your best. But the difficult ones are the ones where you can't even approach the topic.
Well, and then you keep putting it off. So we actually had, my husband and I, when we first started dating, actually had to have a intervention with my parents. My parents are lovely. They've been married for like 55 plus years, and my dad turns like 80 in a couple weeks. But they're kind of like, they were set in their ways. You know, they say that you can't teach an old dog new tricks.
Yeah.
Well, they had these like expectations of, and I think it was like really unconscious or subconscious, of the type of men that my sister and I would marry or date or create a family with. And it was certainly not my husband, Dan. I mean, there were elements of it, but he's a very unique character, which is also the ingredients that got him to be so successful in business and life. But that made it really hard for them to understand him because different values, different levels of energy. He's go, go, go. We're not so much. So finally, I was just so upset with seeing my mom and Dan butt heads all the time. I wrote down a list of points of discussion. And I said to them, we were visiting them, that we're going to have a meeting in the sunroom tomorrow at 11 a.m. They didn't know it was an intervention. So essentially, we open up the floor. And I said, this is going to be a tough, awkward conversation that could last 30 minutes or an hour or 3. The only thing I ask is nobody gets angry or leaves. We need to full circle this conversation. And I said, here are the points we're going to talk about. We're not going to go on a tangent or off topic. We're going to come back to these points. And you can ask questions. You can ask anything. And can you imagine, not like a very few amount of people in the world have actually been given the grace to sit in the room to speak their
Yeah.
truth. And how clarifying was that? Like, what for them? They're like, I finally understand, Dan. I understand you. I understand why you're attracted to him. And they got to be like, here's the things that I don't understand or don't like. And it's like, it's fair, but you don't have to hate each other. You don't have to dislike each other or make it so awkward to share a space because there's certain things that you just don't agree on. And like, I love my husband so much, and there's still things that we don't agree on. And it's just inevitable in being in a relationship.
Absolutely.
But if you can build the courage to actually have that tough conversation, then it gives you a decision to either move forward or stay stuck. And moving forward could very much mean that you're completely separating from that relationship. And oftentimes that's what happens. And you know what?
Yeah.
That's okay. Because when you make the decision, holy crap, there's so much clarity that comes in from actually deciding yes or no.
Absolutely. And I think that in itself is such a huge act of self-care because, you know, very often we look at like the conversation as the difficult part. And yeah, absolutely, that is the difficult part. But what could be really in some ways worse is the fact that you might lose that relationship, like you just said. And so I wonder how often that's actually what we're really scared of. And so we put so much emphasis on the conversation being the difficult part that we're trying to avoid. But it's actually a huge act of self-care to say, do you know what? I'm willing to lose this relationship. It doesn't mean I'm going to try and lose it, but the willingness just kind of allows you to let go of all the things that don't matter. And I've found personally for me that when I've had relationships that I've felt really like attached, but it felt healthy, but I kind of knew it wasn't because it was a little bit maybe like, you know, when you're kind of like checking out somebody's mood, how are they feeling? And then your mood depends on that. Or you're like, okay, have they messaged? Have they not? And you're kind of just like a little bit on edge. And so even though you might be like, this is a great friend, you know, like you can't bring up certain topics. It's just you're walking on eggshells a little bit, right? And I've realized in so many of those situations that actually what I had to do there was really recognize, okay, well, what do I want for my future? Because I haven't worked so hard and, you know, been kind of like given up so many things in life to then treat myself badly via other people. Like that just isn't a match, you know? And so I love that you spoke about that courage because I think courage can, you know, have so many different facets and we might think, oh my God, it's the conversation that's really bad, but actually it's the losing the relationship. And it takes a huge amount of courage to be willing to lose a relationship because we don't want to lose stuff because then we always go into, well, what could have been?
Right. We're actually engineered to avoid losing something as opposed to gaining something.
Yeah.
And the other thing too that we fear is maybe having that tough conversation, but that other person not thinking anything was wrong at all. And all of a sudden it gets weird because they're like, well, now you think I'm a bitch or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
It does change, but
totally.
It's almost like, and also it just got me thinking, these are the conversations you need to have with yourself too. Like, do you ever just sit with yourself and like think about all these things, like having conversations with yourself all the time? I should do it or I shouldn't. I should say that. I should be working. I should be eating better. It's like all these shoulds. But like, when can you just come back to yourself and have that intervention being, shut up, like stop talking to yourself like that. Do the damn thing or don't. Say the damn thing or don't. Like, anyway, it's really interesting. But I would say in life, relationship, business, tough conversations is inevitable. And to flex that muscle, to build that muscle, to have tougher conversations, kind of the name of the game. Like you go through those tough, like going back to the woman that sued me for wrongful dismissal, biggest insult of my life, biggest insult. And, you know, you always try to like look for the lessons in this. Like, what did I learn? And it's only been, I don't know, it's probably like 10 years ago that this happened, but it's only recently that I learned that it's just building that foundation for being able to deal with a bunch of BS. Like more crap sandwiches that come my way. I'm like, poof. Got it. I know how to deal with this. No problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's definitely like graduating to the next level, you know, with all of this, which, you know, it is also a really interesting thing I find because, you know, I'm sure I don't speak only for myself, but when we do have those relationships that are with exactly the same personality type, but just in a different body, and you're like, how did I end up here again? And, one of the things that I've really had to look at in the last kind of like 5 years or so is, okay, what is it about me that I keep choosing that? However it's dressed, whether it's a relationship with somebody who's underperforming in my team. I don't want to hurt them. I prefer to keep the peace. Peace for me is one of my values. Like I love having, things be peaceful. And I'm not avoiding conflict, but I certainly have in the past. And so really having a look at myself and going, okay, so what are the things here that I'm really avoiding actually? And very often it's been things that are so easy to change, Renee. It's almost embarrassing to look at it because I'm like, I could have changed this 10 years ago rather than go through the same mistake. So absolutely having those conversations with yourself and going, all right, what's actually going on behind this?
There's always something. So what are those things you can change seemingly so easy?
Well, I think for me personally, what has been really interesting to look at is, again, what are kind of my core values? Like, what is my inner compass? Because then anything that is a lie or is based on reaction or ego, that just has to fall away. And so I was brought up by a family that didn't have a lot of money. So for me, I always wanted to take care of everybody and make enough money that money was never an issue for my family or people that I cared about. And in that, sometimes I would take on projects or clients that I didn't really want to, but I was like, well, this aligns with my business, or whatever. And then I had to bring it back and go, well, I'm now dealing with a situation that is not great. What can I change about it? And the only thing that I could change really was the direction that I was heading in and looking at, okay, what is actually important to me, and recognizing that things like integrity, things like contribution, I always love to leave people, places, projects greater than when I found them. That to me is invigorating and inspiring. And I realized where I was making choices not based off of that. And so one thing that I was working with a client on just a couple of weeks ago was really looking at, okay, so what are your core values? Because sometimes we think we have to change this big part of our personality or some big limitation that we have. Like, I always make this mistake. But I think if you give yourself some grace and actually not only look at the things that are wrong with you, but look at what's really important, you might find that you've just been choosing things that don't align with who you truly are.
Yeah. Yes. And it's funny you say that because we are traveling the world with our kids right now. And travel is a core value of our family, but not to this extent. And it took my husband a decade to convince me to do this. And so it's like, it's not that it's not a value. It's just that it's really tough for me. And I think there's like the difference between deciding between if this is a core value versus is this going to expand me? Will this like increase my capacity? So it's tough, but especially when it comes to like people, right? So there's things, places, whatever tasks to do. The people is the most important like filter for values. So even look at the people that work at Martell Media. Like, so they rented this Airbnb to do a lot of recording for content. And we were just talking about this here, how it's like the team has to fit the value because they have to be the type of people that are not only really great at what they do, like world class. If not, they can easily be trained. Yeah. But they have to be people that I would go and have lunch with or go hike a mountain with or go sightseeing with.
Yeah.
Because you'd spend so much time with them. So the values is huge. And we don't all share like the exact same values, but like the most important ones. It's like family, health, like expansion. And if you look at the team, it's like, you would almost know without them always wearing the same branded t-shirt who works with us.
Yeah.
And when building the team, growing the team, it comes back to that. It's like no victimized personality would ever make it through because it would catch it right away, despite how incredibly talented they could be. Because like we said, it becomes draining on everybody else.
Absolutely. And I think it's so great that you guys are so clear on your values. Because one thing that I see with a lot of clients is that that stuff gets put to one side. And it's more like, well, when I have the success or when I have the relationship, then I'll be able to focus on what's truly important to me, when really it should be the other way around. And I know it can seem cheesy to say that, but at the same time, if you really have a look at it, like you just said, you'd walk into a room and you'd pretty much know who's part of your team and who isn't. And I'm sure that even though, like you said, the values aren't identical, the ones that are slightly different allow you to grow. And that to me is a huge part of the contribution that we all are to each other in business and personal relationships. But you can only get there if you're not trying to divorce yourself from you and make yourself into, fit into something that somebody else wants.
Yes. And even like in my era now is I grew up like not a straight A student. I was always goofy, a little awkward, but I was fun. Like people like loved having me around. I was never like the prettiest girl in school, probably the last girl to date in high school, which I didn't care about. But when I got into the world of business, it was advised that I really downplay that goofiness, the quirky side of me, because I couldn't be taken seriously if I did. And so I was pushing down a massive part of me that was just so easy to be in, to fit into what is expected in the business world. Now, yes, there are circumstances that are serious. It doesn't require you to tell stupid jokes. I get it. But for the most part, being yourself allows other people to lean into themselves as well. So the last year, really, people are like, Renee, there's something in you that's really changed. Like energetically, we can see this. And I said, I just don't give a crap anymore what you're supposed to do in business, what standards are expected in business. I'm going to be me. And it turns out is the best business move ever, because I'm attracting the right people that either match that energy or want more of it, which makes doing business so much more fun.
Yeah. And I think that's such a key thing. Like it makes life more fun.
Yeah.
Like rather than trying to do things right, looking at, okay, what is actually, of course, what's going to work. Don't try and make things, turn out badly. But like you said, being yourself. Because, I've had situations as well where I remember working in the Middle East and having to meet a very, very important person in government, and just completely changing my behavior when I walked into the room. And I was kind of having this internal conversation with myself whilst I was having a conversation with this client. And I was thinking like, what am I doing? I can't seem to get out of this like weird character. And luckily the secretary came in and or the assistant, she was like, hey, would you guys like some coffee? And so that kind of put enough of a pause where I could, gather my thoughts. And I thought to myself, I'm literally taking on a whole other identity that I think this person is expecting, but I don't even know him. And it was just that tiniest shift. And I was still obviously very respectful and still professional, but it allowed me to actually recognize where I was functioning from. I didn't need to massively alter my behavior or do anything different, but I had to really name what was going on for me, because I think so many things that we fall into become like this just automatic reaction. Because we're trained to do that, and we see it on TV and we see it all around us, and we maybe saw our parents do it and we see how it works really well for our best friend when they do it, when they go on a date or whatever. And so somewhere along the line, I bought that I had to behave a certain way. In the Middle East, there I was like my hijab, by like everything. And I was like, I have to behave completely differently. And I didn't. And the moment that I recognized that for myself, even my whole team managed to relax because they noticed that I was behaving off.
And it's so contagious too. On a similar but not similar note is our very first flight on this world tour got canceled. The very first flight. And I don't even know how many plane rides are going to be taken over the next year. But I was traveling solo to Europe with my boys. And I know like when they made the announcement to get off the plane and they didn't know how long we'd be waiting for, my kids looked to me to understand how they should be reacting.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh gosh, this is my moment to be a leader. A leader is the one that just like has to hold on, especially in the public eye. Because of course I was a little bit stressed, but I was like, okay, get off the plane and just walk. And if you need this time to take a breath, go to the bathroom and like do what you got to do there. But it's like, when you're a leader, you hold on to that. You have this radical responsibility because people are looking to you to know how to react, right? So in that moment for you, it's like the team was with you couldn't see too much of you, but they could sense that
Yeah.
energy. They're like, this isn't her. Oh, and now this is a cue to them to not act according to how they would either, to act according to these
Definitely.
standards that were unwritten rules. And
Yeah.
now all of a sudden you're like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I will forever be grateful for that secretary who came in and offered us coffees and these delicious dates because it really gave us a moment. Because otherwise I could have just continued,
Yeah.
you know?
Oh my gosh, I love this. And you know, it's like, it's one of the hardest things to do as a leader to just almost like, I don't even know how to describe it, but you have to be the example. And sometimes in that moment, it does go against every ounce of your being to not want to just cry or scream or, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
And there's moments you can do that. But also it's like, it's that energy. And actually, it's funny that you said something about, you know, making rooms a better place. That's one of my mottos in life is every room I enter is a better place because I was there. It could be as little as a public bathroom where there's extra like garbage on the ground and I can just, you know, use a paper towel to clean it up or wipe down the counter.
Yeah.
These little acts, somebody sees it. Somebody walks in and they notice that this bathroom is a little bit cleaner than it usually is. Or
Yeah.
that woman who I've gone to the same coffee shop here in Barcelona and I see her now, it's like 3 days in a row. She now knows me. She knows that I'm not going to give her money, but I will always give her presents. I said,
Yeah.
so sorry. Hope you're having a great day. Like we can all do this. And like those little changes. And here's what happens is even if you are somebody with a victim mentality, if you can start doing these like micro doses of making the room, the building, wherever a better place because you're in it, it starts to shift you. It starts to like hold up mirrors to where you're being the victim to say, here's the work you got to do, sister. Let's go there.
Yeah.
And then we'll get better and better. Okay.
Yeah.
I could talk to you forever. I do have one last question for you. When I ask you what it means to be a wild woman, what is that to you?
Oh my goodness, what a great question. I would say really living unapologetically and knowing that it is an honor to be a woman and to use that as an incredible power to lead. Because just like you were saying, you know, to me, that you were describing about even, you know, making every space better, even if it's a bathroom, whatever that may be, to me, that is actually the foundation of a leader. And you can be doing that in your relationships. You can be doing that with your kids. Like we're all leaders, whether we like it or not, unfortunately, because somebody is going to be impacted by your behavior and your choices. Some people just choose to do that in business. So that's just a different arena, you know, but to me, it's really an incredible gift to be able to do that as a woman. And like you said, we're in an era where we are having some doors opened where we can really be ourselves in business and in the you know, world of entrepreneurship. So
I love it. That's so true. We're all leaders. Every single person. You're a leader. You're a leader. You're a leader. Okay. So if people want to go online to find you, where can they go?
My website, divadiaz.com. You can find everything there.
I love it. Well, Diva, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Renee. It's been wonderful.